Hey folks, it's Fernando doing another video here for the Modern Survivalist. In one of my previous videos, the one on current world events, someone asked about Australia, saying, do you think Australia is probably one of the safest countries to live in with all the turmoil and social unrest that's about to occur in terms of, problems in Europe, the United States, Russia, especially the Northern Hemisphere countries? Would Australia make sense? Absolutely. I mean, you're talking about a country that's very isolated from all of that in the Southern Hemisphere, a good distance away. That doesn't mean that Australia is perfect, and it even has quite a bit of problems of its own in terms of social problems with immigrants. There's quite a bit of racism and xenophobia regarding immigrants from Asia and such. But having said that, because of the geographic location, it's quite a bit of a safe place. Crime is also quite good. Using my book, Bugging Out and Relocating, as always, the link is there below, and just using it so as to look it up. I don't remember exactly how well it ranked in terms of actual safety so as to have a measure of how safe a country is, I would usually go for the homicide rate by country. This is page 96. Why homicide rate per country? It's one of the most, in general, it's one of the most reliable ways of having somewhat of an idea of how bad a country is. Because if you just take into account violent crime, that's so it's hard to define exactly what some countries, what one country considers it a violent crime, another may not even take it into account at all. Now, with an actual homicide, it's actually a dead guy. Even within that, it depends on what each country considers as a homicide. Not all countries have the same idea of what a homicide is. So if it's if someone is being murdered during a robbery, maybe that's considered a homicide, while a person being killed in some other more suspicious or less clear circumstances would not fall into the records as a homicide. So there is also a margin of error here as well, but in general you could say that a dead guy that was killed by someone else would fall into the homicide standards. One more thing, and this is something that I do explain in the book, that all these figures, all these charts and such, you have to cross-reference them with corruption by country. Transparency International does a ranking of the most corrupt countries, the most transparent ones, and this is very important because if you cross-reference them, you may see things that are not really making a lot of sense, and that's because in the more corrupt countries, there's a greater chance of those figures, that data being tampered and not being as truthful as it should be. And looking at a good example, actually, in the ranking of the safest countries, the safest one, Monaco, because of the extremely low homicide rate. Monaco, very small country, but very safe country. Is it an ideal country? Yeah, sure, no. But in terms of how safe it is, Monaco is very likely a very safe place to live in. Iceland, Japan, you have other places, Austria, Norway. Usually the Nordic countries are quite safe. Spain is pretty safe as well. Italy, and here we have a great example of what I'm just talking about here. For example, Ireland ranks at 39 as in terms of safety, in terms of the homicide rate by country, ranking 39 for Ireland. But at the same time, you have Egypt ranking at 38. Now, let me tell you, there's no way in hell that there's less homicides in Egypt than in Ireland. That should be obvious to everyone. Now, the thing is that if you look at the transparency and the corruption in Egypt, I'm pretty sure they have awful figures regarding the corruption. And actually, I also have it here in the book, so we don't have even to guess it. Let's go to page 73. Corruption Percentage Index, page 73. All right, here we go. Most corrupt country Now, least corrupt country in the planet, Denmark. That's the one ranking number 1. Denmark, Finland, New Zealand, those are the least corrupt countries in the world. Now let's look at our friend Egypt, where it ranks. Yep, no. Ranking, yeah, Egypt would be ranked at 118, all right, along with Indonesia and Ecuador. So as you see, there's a good chance that the homicide rate being reported by Egypt is not even close to what it's really like. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, going back to Australia. Australia, in terms of homicide rate, you have it in ranking at number 31. Ranking 31, it's not the safest place. No, you have Italy 22, you have Spain at 18, but for Australia, 31 is not bad at all. As a reference, the United States is, well, at 104 in terms of homicide rate for the country. So 104 for the United States. Of course, this has, this is a global standard, and you have cities that are much dangerous than others, or counties that are much dangerous than others. But in general, you could say that Australia is safer than the United States. I would say so, yeah. And how good of an option is Australia? I think it's great. Australia has lots of great things going for it. It's a pretty safe country, as we were just seeing, as we were just talking about. It's a good strategically located country in terms of a conflict taking place in the Northern Hemisphere. The countries in the Northern Hemisphere, Australia would be well secluded from that. It has great standards of living as well in terms of medical care, quality of life. It ranks, in fact, many of the best cities to live in the planet are in Australia. New Zealand as well would be another option, but Australia specifically, wages are very good. Even for for the low income type of jobs, people that are working at things are not very qualified, but that you don't need much qualification, not great skills or anything like that. Even for any normal job, you're going to be making good money. It's also an expensive place to live in, so that kind of compensates one with the other. Very interesting country in terms of the population density, lots of pretty low population. At the same time, you have lots of desert as well. So if you're looking at the natural resources and such, mostly you're going to be sticking to the eastern coast of Australia. Having said all that, the same thing that makes Australia such a good option in terms of being isolated does work against you in more normal times. I mean, you're talking about Australia. It's pretty far away from everything else, and it's surrounded mostly by the nearest countries that you have are Asian ones. So if you're looking at going back and forth to Europe or the United States, you're talking about quite a bit of a distance. It's pretty far away from everything, Australia. So that makes it one of the things that it's not as nice. It's not as easy to get there. It's not as easy to get away from it, which some people, they end up not adapting, and you may want to be going back home and such. It's much easier when you're closer. Australia has the advantage of being far away, but as we've talked about many times before, that distance is not always the best thing. Same thing for being in an island. It's one thing to be in a continent where you have more countries and you can just drive from one country to the other. But when you're in an island, especially at an island that's so far away from pretty much everywhere else that you may be interested in going back to, that has some of its negatives as well. But great countries, pretty safe, great quality of living. So there's lots of very good things going for Australia by all means. Folks, the book has lots of more information, and as you see, these charts help make an accurate decision regarding any other country that you're considering. When you see that it does very well in certain things, but it doesn't score very well in others, you have more information to work with. Folks, that's going to be all for now. Take care, have a great day, and as always, see you in our next video.